Okay, hello. Today is May 30th, 2023, and we'll talk about two architects, two very important architects. We'll start with Junzo Sakakura from Japan, and let's read a little bit about him. Sakakura was born, as I said, he was born on the 30th of May, if I'm not mistaken. Here I see the precise date. Day is not shown. Was a Japanese architect and former president of the Architectural Association of Japan. After graduating from university, he worked in Le Corbusier's atelier in Paris. He rose to the position of studio chief during his 7 years stay in the studio. Not bad. So he worked with Le Corbusier for 7 years. He formed his own practice on his return to Japan, becoming an important member of the modernist movement. In 1959, he collaborated with Le Corbusier on the National Museum of Western Art in Tokyo, which was the only work that Le Corbusier built in Japan. So here we see a picture of both of them, both with bow ties, showing a certain dignified face of what architects can be about. So here we see a picture of Sakakura and Charlotte Perriand, an important collaborator of Le Corbusier. I don't know where this picture was taken. It seems he was not so young any longer, or anyway, who knows? Maybe in France, maybe in Japan. So on the left, Charlotte Perriand. Please remember her name because she was a very interesting architect and designer who had some difficulties with Le Corbusier, but in the end, I think the master appreciated her, and it's a good thing he did. Okay, moving forward, here we see again, Sakakura is in the back, and Le Corbusier, and I don't know who the other people are. Le Corbusier was very appreciated in Japan, and not only in Japan. I read actually that when he searched for a job for Le Corbusier, Sakakura, Le Corbusier recommended him to take some courses in architecture and construction in Paris, and he did for about 6 months. But this is a little bit ironical almost, because it's well known and documented the fact that Le Corbusier hated schools. But maybe the other side of him appreciated them, and that's why he sent Sakakura to study for 6 months. Now, the Pavilion of Japan, the exhibition, the Universal Exhibition, World's Exhibition from 1937. You see, 1937, this was before the Second World War, and it's a very, modernistic structure. 1937. Maybe today doesn't look so freshly modern, but at that time you can imagine. I read that actually Sakakura was very influenced by Villa Savoie and the pavilion, the Le Corbusier pavilion built in Zurich, in Switzerland. Maybe he even collaborated on those works with Le Corbusier. It seems that Le Corbusier did have an important influence on important architects, future important architects. Like yesterday we talked about Yannis Xenakis. Today we talk about Junzo Sakakura. So I guess it pays to be in the proximity of, maybe we don't exaggerate too much if we say a formidable architect and cultural figure, an artist and provocateur, Le Corbusier. But this building is not bad by Sakakura at all. Residence of Taro Okamoto, also by Sakakura. And this is rather unexpected. No, it's almost exotic. This was, I think, an important Japanese artist, and this is the residence. I don't know when this was built by Sakakura. Unfortunately, I don't have here the year when it was built, but actually, when I look at this elevation towards the street, I'm thinking that it's very possible to do a very engaging and interesting architecture where the front elevation is actually could be blank, just like is this, with an emblem or some kind of bas relief or a sculptural treatment of the elevation, just like it is here. Now, of course, this is an artist studio, so a museum, so you know, in this case, is more appropriate. But even if you build for, let's say, an accountant, you can express something in the elevation, a narration connecting, you know, the preoccupations, you know, the life of the owner with the architectural expression. For example, if this building was built for an accountant, what would you do to express the fact that it was an accountant living in that house? You know, and I think there is a great potential in a narrative architecture. And here we do have a narrative architecture. The facade is telling you something about what you are going to see inside the building, and that is the artworks of this artist Tarot. And here we see, you know, artworks by the artist. I do think it's probably very beneficial to reflect on the possibility of a narrative architecture, because I think most of the time we just, you know, design or build, make a project for a building that is maybe correct functionally, maybe pleasing aesthetically, but it doesn't say anything about the characteristics of the inhabitant. Savoy, Villa Savoy doesn't say anything about the Savoy family, and the Falling Water building by Frank Lloyd Wright doesn't say anything about the, you know, the owners, the Kaufman family. Well, this was not done by Sakakura, but by the artist. Now, the French-Japanese Institute in Tokyo, 1950, drawing. The drawing is very much influenced by even the font of the letters, you know, come from Le Corbusier. Not bad. It's a good building. Sakakura was indeed one of the three, maybe more, but I read that the three fathers of modern architecture in Japan. I only know the other one, not the third one, Kunio Maekawa, about whom we talked some days ago. So again, this was built more than 70 years ago. But if you build something like this today, it will still be appreciated as a contemporary work of architecture. The City Hall in Hiraoki, Osaka, Japan, 1964. They loved concrete and they loved Le Corbusier, and you see here the influence of the Swiss master, and you see also, you know, the affection the Japanese had after they were devastated by the Second World War for concrete, and in its brutalist mode, exposed concrete. The National Museum of Western Art, this is the one that Le Corbusier built, but Sakakura helped him, was a collaborator. So this is the work, the project of Le Corbusier, the only work done in East Asia and in Japan. It's not an assuming work, it's not a dramatic work, it's a rather small museum. And as I said, Sakakura was in the team that made the project become reality, become a building. the Museum of Western Art in Tokyo. Le Corbusier built another museum, but in Ahmedabad, in India. But he had projects and, you know, he was preoccupied about the idea of a museum of art. And he was, in a strange way, not very far away from what for what Frank Lloyd Wright did in the Guggenheim Museum. In both cases, there was present a spiral, but in the case of Le Corbusier, was a, you know, a spiral governed by geometry that is right angles, as opposed to the spiral movement present in the Guggenheim Museum. Here, the spiral is not so obvious, but there are studies, and you can find them on the web, of even, you know, a museum with unlimited growth. You know, he studied the program, the museum, in almost idealistic ways, Le Corbusier. Sculpture by the great French sculptor Auguste Rodin, the thinker. Possibly the most important work of Sakakura was the West Plaza of Shinjuku Station, today the busiest train station in the world. The plaza became famous also because of the protests that were staged here in the late 1960s and that brought to the fore the debate about the definition of public space in Japan. So this is the work that I read about, and there are interesting, more interesting pictures than this one. It's yeah, a very busy urban place. You know, a lot of infrastructure, circulation. Look at this, but it is even formally or aesthetically accomplished and impressive. Sakakura. Now, I don't know why I show those works there. Back to the station, if we are to call it station. We see some echoes here, so from Le Corbusier again, you know, this maybe they look like almost, you know, giant skylights at the bottom on the left corner, and also in the back here. But still, the language, the architectural language of Sakakura is his own. Ichimura Memorial Gymnasium, 1961. Another good work by him. Again, you know, the exposed concrete that characterizes a lot of Japanese architecture from those years. Japan was trying to escape the, you know, the great shadow of the Second World War by asserting itself as a progressive country, and its modernism in architecture expressed itself through exposed concrete, you know, denoting a sense of permanence, of solidity, of rigidity. I like very much this, this view of this gymnasium. It's almost expressionistic somehow. This could have been a church seen from this angle. Inter-University Seminar House, Hachioji, Tokyo, 1964. Now look at this, 1964, an educational building. It seems almost whimsical. It seems capricious. It seems, you know, almost a little bit irresponsible. But because we know very well that in some schools of architecture, this would be unacceptable. What do you mean? Slanted walls? How are you going to put the furniture there? Would be the, you know, the question. Well, obviously in Japan, they don't have an issue with this. Sakakura, and it was, more than 60 years ago. Is it interesting? Yes. Is it a little bit, idiosyncratic? Yes. But it's an interesting building. Why not acknowledge it as such? And you can see a lot of indifference in a way towards the finishes of the building. It is an engaging building. You'll never forget it once you see it, even if you saw it in a picture like we do now. Summer house in Karu is about 1962. In Japan, even the most radical architects never ever totally remove themselves from their past and from the rooting in their tradition. Interesting that terrace on top of the sloping roof. This reminds me of some houses in the United States that are suggested in Moby Dick's Melville's novel Moby Dick, where the wives of the sailors would go on top of the roof on such terraces and contemplate the horizon to see if their husbands or brothers or sons return from their voyage, oftentimes a dangerous voyage. University of the Arts. This is also an excellent building, reminding one a little bit of the Hiroshima Peace Memorial by Kenzo Tange. Truly, the way they employed concrete is very convincing. Unfortunately, for us today, as we know, concrete pollutes a lot, but in terms of architectural expression, it is very convincing, particularly when it is not hidden, by so-called, finishes. So it's a college of arts. Junzo Sakakura. Le Pilotis, another echo from Le Corbusier, elevating the building, and then underneath many functions could take place. Sculptural, vigorous, honest. What you see is what you get. And here they are, Sakakura on the left, Le Corbusier on the right. Again, working for 7 years for Le Corbusier was not a little thing. The Institute Franco-Japanese, French Japanese in Tokyo. Look at those columns. I don't know if they were a little bit influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright's mushroom columns at Johnson Wax complex of buildings in Wisconsin, the United States. They are a little bit different. But again, we see Sakakura being a very innovative and creative and uninhibited architect. As good architects should be. Hello, Mr. Sakakura. Now the Museum of Modern Art in Kamakura, the 1951. I imagine here is during the construction. But the manner of the drawing makes me feel, the influence of Le Corbusier. And even the building is in a way similar to the Museum of Western Art that Le Corbusier built, and which also received a contribution from Sakakura. So he built this building by himself without Le Corbusier. And as always, the attention to nature is very moving in Asia in general and in Japan in particular. It's not the garden in Japan. It's not just a leftover, you know, piece of work. No, it's never like this. Okay, so now we go to the second presentation. Just a second, please.